Welcome to the MSP Owner, where we explore the journeys of MSP entrepreneurs building and scaling successful IT businesses. Today, I'm joined by Nick Akers, President and CEO of Inzo Technologies. Nick's company does $15 million of revenue with about 40 employees. Today, we're going to dive into his rebrand from STL Communications into Inzo Technologies, scaling an MSP while maintaining a strong culture, and some lessons that he's learned throughout the company growth and leadership. So excited to get into it. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, Ben, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. So why don't you kick it off by giving us a little bit of background of where'd you start off your professional career, so we have a little bit of context here.
Sure. So my undergraduate degree is in chemistry. And so I didn't want to get a job after graduating. So the natural thing to do was go to graduate school also in chemistry. So did that, and just a series of events, probably got fortunate and invented something kind of cool in graduate school. They got a fair amount of attention and ended up starting what became a venture capital funded company. So, right out of graduate school, I had to figure out how to license technology, get patents, start a company, hire people, lead people as the CEO, deal with investors, all this type of stuff. So it was a really good and unique first career experience. And then we did that for about 8 years and brought on a strategic as the new majority owner. And so good, decent run. It was a lot of fun. Then from there, really kind of a more normal career path. So I ran business development for an engineering firm that was largely dealing with commercial and defense aerospace customers. And did that for a few years. Super fun job, worked with people that were way more intelligent than I am. It was a really, really great experience. But I think the formative years of my leadership activity was really in a family-owned chemical company. So it's my father-in-law's company. So I started out there as an individual contributor, but very quickly became the managing director. As really like a president, COO type role in terms of responsibility. And was there for 6 or 7 years. We doubled the size of the business.
How big was that company?
Yeah, we got it to about 100 million by the time I left. 300 employees. When I joined, it was a great company, but it really hadn't gone through that professionalization stage yet. And so there was just tons of low-hanging fruit that were obvious to me to go just start to professionalize the business. These were simple things. I know it sounds simple, but putting in budgeting processes, putting in employee review process. We redid the whole tech stack for the business, hardware, software, put together a board. So I ran the board for a number of years, and then just became kind of a natural point of, I knew I'd push the organization pretty hard. We had grown quite a bit. The next logical step for us would have been to probably engage in some acquisitions. And I just knew my father-in-law wasn't going to go there. So I had this crazy thought. I just decided to burn the boats and jump out of that. I call it the velvet prison of a family business, and try to go do something myself. So I spent about 3 years in fumbling around. I didn't even know what a search fund was or ETA, but I was trying to buy a business and just kind of making up the process along the way until I discovered ETA and got into a more formal search fund that ultimately led to acquiring this business.
So you did not get an MBA and do the traditional search fund path? Okay.
Nope. I had not a single business or finance class in college.
I would love to dig into, you were at the family-run business, you had a key leadership position, and then you decided, hey, I want to go try to buy a business, let alone a technology company. Did you have a pain point, or you were like, I want to carve my own path? Or what was your motivation there for seeking a change?
Yeah, there were a lot of things. I know quite a few second and third generation family business people, and we all kind of have the same stories of challenges of being in a family business, especially when you are the second or third generation. So family business is messy. You're discussing business at Thanksgiving and, all that type of stuff. And I think sometimes people are viewed uh, not so much as an individual person, but like what value you can bring to the family business. Um, so there were some, personal struggles, but also, I was maybe 40 years old at the time, maybe 39. I don't remember, but, I knew that my father-in-law was not leaving anytime soon. So I didn't want to really sit around, and this might be a huge mistake of mine, but I didn't want to sit around and just kind of like hang out around the water cooler for another 10 or 15 years. That just doesn't fit my style. I'm too aggressive. Like I want to go get stuff. I want to grow. Let's go. And so that just led to me wanting to go create my own path and legacy.
How did you end up, for those who aren't familiar, you went and raised a traditional search fund, right? Can you explain
Basically,
what that is or what your structure was if it's different? Because I don't think people within this industry have a lot of context for what that is.
Yep. So the traditional search fund, you basically raise a some amount of money to cover the expenses of your search phase from a handful of investors. You might have half a dozen, you might have a dozen. And you're going to raise anywhere from 400,000 to, in my case, it was about 700,000, because the model was a little bit different. And so that's paying for your personal salary during typically a 24-month search period. It's meant to pay for your due diligence fees leading up to the close. So what I did was an accelerator-based search fund with a partner called Novastone Capital. And it essentially looks exactly like a normal search fund in terms of the economics for everybody involved. But the pitch of the accelerator model is you come in and they essentially immediately fund you, right? So you don't have to go give your pitch to half a dozen investors. You're giving your pitch to this Novastone Capital. They select you.
They take the whole equity stack.
So their model has evolved since I joined. So I was the first searcher in North America. They had been doing the model in Europe, I think, for about 2 years at the point that I joined in, late 2022, where they had kind of a limited partner-like model. So, I still have a handful of individuals on my cap table, but Novastone brought them all to the table and managed that whole process.
I see.
Whereas now they've gone more to it really looks like a private equity fund structure. They have the fund, they have limited partners that feed into it, but you just go, you get approved, and then you're immediately funded.
Got it. So it reduces the having to raise capital like a traditional search fund would need to go and raise individual units from investors. So it kind of solved that. And then I assume that they had did they have a pretty good track record of closing deals within Europe, or how did you make the jump from someone with probably not a lot of experience in the US?
Yeah, so there were a few things that made me kind of gravitate towards their program. One, they did have a track record in Europe. And Novastone, like these other accelerators that are in place now, is they also, in addition to the capital, they pitch other services, right? So Novastone, for example, had in-house legal teams, in-house due diligence teams to kind of do the first step of light diligence. They had deal sourcing teams to help you as you build your list to do outreach. And, they had the in-house Excel wizards. So I looked at the partnership as they bring to the table some of the skill sets I don't have, right? So I mentioned I didn't get an MBA. I can't do the crazy LBO models that those folks can do. So I viewed it as a way to improve the odds of success in closing a deal.
And they probably loved you because you have tons of business management experience running larger companies, and you just didn't have that typical MBA profile is my guess.
Well, that's a fair point, because their whole pitch is they partner with what they call mid-career professionals. So that they're not looking for the folks right out of MBA school. They're looking for people with a 10 or 20 year track record.
That's awesome. So it's like a perfect opportunity and role for someone who's in like upper management, and then they can go and find a business. And so you ended up, can you talk about what types of businesses you were looking for, size, industry, because you ultimately bought an MSP, but what did the scope look like at the starting versus near the end?
Yeah. So I started the search with a hyper-specific acquisition thesis, and it was really leveraging my experience at the chemical company. I had started an acquisition thesis while there, and just took that and modified it for kind of the search fund space. So I did the whole proprietary thing from the beginning, thought I would just leverage my network, which I did. I had good conversations with owners, was able to get brokers to provide me with deal flow based on kind of the professional background. But it kind of two things happened that caused me to pivot. One, on the proprietary conversations, they were just taking way too long, right? So, you don't know if you're dealing with a serious seller, and it was my own inexperience. You're taking way too long before you get to a price discussion, and you find that there's a mismatch.
Yep.
But also the deals that we were getting into price alignment on, whether it was a individual or brokered, is the multiples at this time. This was coming out of COVID, were astronomical. Even for a 2 million EBITDA specialty chemical company, you're looking at 8x plus.
It was a really hot market. I mean, it still is, right? A very sexy end industry.
Yeah, it is a very good industry. And so when I would bring these deals back to the Novastone team, because that's where you're going to get the majority of the equity capital, is nobody's entering a search fund deal for 8x, right? That's not going to happen. So there was a misalignment in the valuation of the market that I was looking at acquiring in. So about 6 months into my search phase, I did a total pivot to industry agnostic, geography agnostic, and just was really looking at that typical search fund acquisition list, right? So low CapEx, recurring revenue, limited customer concentration, sticky product. We all know the list. So it took probably 3 months, and also focusing only on broker deals, just exclusively.
Mm.
And so it took about 3 months before I found this one. The company was called STL Communications. We found it in September, I guess that was 22. So my search fund started December of 21. I always get the dates confused. So we found this in September 22, got under LOI basically Christmas Eve of 22 and closed in May of 23. So we're getting close to 2 years now.
Was this the first MSP you looked at, or had you looked at a lot of them and kind of honed in, okay, this is a great opportunity, a great space?
No, this was the first one.
Nice.
It happened to be in the town that I live in. So, it got to be pretty interesting pretty fast.
Wow, that is amazing considering you're doing a national search. And in your hometown, were you currently living there, or you moved back to your hometown after you bought the company?
No, this is I'm in St. Louis. I've lived here for 20 years. It was here.
What are the chances of that? Well,
I don't know, but I'm glad it worked out.
I mean, I'm sure did that help during the sale process that you were actually local to the area, or not really?
It probably did. So the company was with a broker for probably a year before I found it. And it was one of those classic search fund situations where the previous owner wanted to retire. He's got a lot of hobbies, been successful. He wants to go do his thing. So he needed a buyer that could come in and write the check, but also run the business. And so, the private equity folks that, apparently looked at it, they wanted him to sign up for 3 years, that typical playbook, and that just wasn't what he wanted. So I think being local helped, to connect with that owner, and then, being able to bring in local service providers really quickly on the due diligence and legal and all of that. It went pretty well.
Was it a pretty competitive process? Did you have a lot of bidders, or did you feel like you were the leading horse from the start?
We were We were the only ones in the deal at that time, which certainly, you're going to have to wonder, what am I missing here? If there's not six other people circling around. And, now being 2 years into it, there wasn't anything major that we discovered that, would have been a red flag.
Why do you think that happened? Was that just the way in which the broker wanted to approach the deal, like not prospecting a bunch, or just why?
I think the broker, it was a really good broker. I give the broker a lot of credit. They got this deal to the finish line. They were a big help. But I think the company had a very challenging story to tell. So at that time, if you look at their website and their business, they have, roughly a 50%, traditional IT MSP business, but then they've got this other part of the business that is installing and servicing a very specific product in hospitals. It's called a nurse call system. So it's exactly what the name sounds like. You think about a floor on a hospital and a central nurses station and all the equipment there that talks to all the equipment in the patient room. That's a nurse call system. And I just don't think they were, it's like, what is this company? Is it an IT MSP? Is it a systems integrator? Like, what's going on here? So I think the story wasn't clear about who the buyer should be.
Very interesting. I feel like that resonates with how my company was marketed as well with the broker, because it had three legs of the stool, right? It had VoIP, it had IT services, and then it had kind of agency. So it kind of had three different business models within one, and the story was very difficult to tell, and there was a lot of recurring revenue, but it seemed like they were doing a whole bunch of different things for different clients, and it just made the story more difficult to tell. And then I think that also presented opportunities, right? For us who can figure out where we want those businesses to go long term. Hi, I'm Ben Tigelaar, the host of MSP Owner Podcast and the CEO of DataTel, an IT managed service provider with 35 employees. The mission of this podcast is simple: to have authentic conversations with IT owners about their journey, how it started, the challenges they faced, and where they're going next. Every episode, I personally walk away with a new actionable item to strengthen my own business. But a quick word about my company, DataTel. We are actively acquiring MSPs who align with our service and culture. So if your company is generating between $1 and $10 million of revenue, I want to talk to you. But wait, you're probably thinking, why me and why DataTel? First is, I get you. I understand the challenges MSP owners face, being one myself, feeling overworked, overwhelmed, constantly being on call, struggling to bring in new business. I have the solutions and people in place to address these pain points. Second is culture. We run our business on EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, which has been transformative for our employees and clients alike. I believe that building a great company comes down to finding and retaining great people who are in the right seats. Everything else is noise. If any of this resonates, it probably means we're a fit and we should be having a conversation. Until then, let's get back to the show. I'm curious about the overlap between the nurse call and the IT and communications portion of the business. How much overlap was there, or was it literally they're two separate, no overlapping value prop between the two?
That was essentially the case. There's essentially no cross-selling going on, right? So we didn't have hospital nurse call customers that were also buying managed services from us. And, still today, that's probably fairly true, although we're trying to be better about cross-selling.
That is impressive and interesting. So how did you get over the hump in figuring that out before you acquired, like in the time where you were doing diligence? What did you see in the company prior to acquiring? Why were you so excited?
Yeah, so, this company had been around since 1989, which I think is, fairly long in our world, right? So, really long history, some really just on the IT side, amazing customers. If I rattled off the names, they would be recognized. And long-term customer relationships, the really good gross margins. So the financials look good. And, frankly, we got a really good price. So, you're kind of buying down some of that risk with a really good entry multiple, right?
And because it had a bunch of nurse call, I'm sure that the recurring revenue was lower than a typical MSP. Or what was the percent when you acquired? 40, 50% recurring?
It was just a little over 50% recurring. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's still solid though.
Yeah.
That's great. That's awesome. And then so you acquired the business. Was there any red flags that you saw prior to close that ended up not being a big deal, like things that you were really worried about and they were like, ended up not being a challenge?
That's a good question. I don't know if we had that. We kind of had the opposite of, things that became red flags after closing, and nothing major, but at this point, I've basically replaced the whole executive team. So the leadership team that was here at closing is not the leadership team that I have now. That's been a big improvement for me personally, and I think for the business going forward.
How did you approach coming in? Is there stuff that you can share about that experience coming into the company, recognizing that this might not be the right leadership team? And then how do you handle that over the course of the next year?
Yeah, it was a lot to deal with. I certainly came into, the first days and months as, wanting to learn and, we all know the playbook, like don't break anything. So trying to be very collaborative and inclusive, but also, in the search fund model, you have to drive that increased valuation, right? I mean, I don't own this 100% myself, so it's not something I'm going to sit on for 20 years. Investors are going to look for a return. So when, very quickly realized that my vision is not going to be executed with this team and go at the pace that we need to, had to start making those changes. And it's probably some of the more stressful things I've ever had to deal with professionally. I think it was all handled with grace and respect for the folks. And, in one case after the fact, I was thanked, like it was a relief, to the individual. So I think it worked out the right way for everybody.
And was this the first time that you really had to, I mean, obviously you had let people go in the past, but this is a different beast where, you're letting go kind of the core fabric sometimes of the company, you feel like maybe, but then also you're having to deal with, backfilling it as well. Was it, were you prepared in your prior work experience to like handle this, or this was all another level of intensity?
Well, for better or worse, I have had to let people go, even from the very first that company I founded. And it's, I think I've heard somebody say, if you enjoy it, you're probably a psychopath. So it's never an enjoyable thing, but it's our responsibility. You have to do it. I mean, you can't not do these things. I think the added layer of complexity here was, these people had been with the business for a very long time. So, how do you address that with the rest of the organization? That was hard. It took a while to get over that and make sure people weren't completely freaked out.
Yeah. And part of it is you're coming into a new organization and you have to build trust, and then you've got to make some really tough, necessary changes. And then you have to rebuild that trust again. And I'm guessing, that's what I experienced a little bit of that as well. It sounds like it's been good for everyone involved. The employees are probably happier who are doing something else, and you've got a company who's aligned with where you're going. Have you tried to, so it sounds like you had some transition from a managerial perspective. And then I did see that you guys made a big brand shift. You went from STL Communications, which we were talking months and months and months ago while you were still STL Communications, and then you made this brand shift and change. Really curious about what inspired that. How did walk me through that process? Because that's something that I've been very interested to dig into.
Yeah. So actually renaming the company was part of our pre-close value creation plan. for a couple reasons. One, the name STL Communications implies St. Louis, right? So you're kind of, my view was you're limiting yourself right from the get-go with your name, because it implies a very specific regional focus. And we have customers in probably 40 states, and we're really strong in like the 5 surrounding states around us. So I even asked the owner pre-close, like, hey, when you're up in Iowa or Illinois as STL Communications, does anybody ever say, like, what are you doing here? And his answer was, well, yeah, they like, why are you from St. Louis up here in Des Moines or whatever? So I wanted to kind of just remove that hurdle, whether it was a huge hurdle or not, I don't know, but let's just get that out of here. And the other part was, the website was not good. The branding was not good. It was not my style. And, wanted to bring it up into something that was truly mine. And, we've got a good new website now, a good marketing partner.
It looks awesome.
Yeah, thanks. Our logo, I think our logo looks good. So just real happy with how that turned out.
Cool. And then you mentioned a value creation plan before you acquired. What other items were on that list that were like clear opportunities? How are you going to create value with this business?
So, none of these are brilliant ideas that I came up with. Driving increased percentage of recurring revenue, right? That's going to be obvious. That's likely where your higher margin sales are in comparison to project-based, nurse call installs. So, improving the margin profile of the business, controlling costs. Certainly I'm a little envious of you that you've gotten at least one acquisition done. I'd like to get a few acquisitions done. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us in that space.
Yeah. So your business does $15 million of revenue right now. Wow. Yeah. I thought that you were at like 7 to 8 million of revenue, and I thought you had made another acquisition to get to 15, 16. Wow. That's awesome. So it was a very sizable company already.
Yeah. And, we've achieved that 15 million through organic growth. So we've grown several million since the acquisition, which has been, that's obviously great. And
2 years, right? Since the acquisition. Right.
Yeah.
So you're growing organically pretty solidly. Where are you seeing that growth come from? It sounds like mostly IT services, given your rebrand to Inzo Technologies.
We added a lot of recurring revenue last year. I don't want to give the number, but it was a lot.
It's awesome.
And, we're just picking up business. Frankly, we get a lot of business from people not happy with their current provider. And I'm curious, I think it was you that mentioned in one of your previous episodes that don't say that you differentiate yourself on customer service.
We were talking about that because it is just like, it's that thing that every MSP says the exact same thing. So if everyone says it, is it really different? And then someone will come in and say, well, my service is actually better than everyone else's, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're going to say?
Well, I'm curious, because I look at it as we all sell the same stuff, right? There's a handful of vendors that provide these services that we partner with. So if we all sell the same stuff and we don't have some marketing gimmick that's driving all the inbound magic, what in the world are we going to tell our customers other than, hey, we're going to answer the phone when you call us, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all focus. I think this is funny because we all focus on what's special or unique about us. But the reality is that the people who win are the ones who can execute, sell, communicate value, and provide consistent service. Like those are going to win, right? We always want it to be special, and obviously it's better to be special. But I don't know. Disagree?
No, I look at this industry. It's like a product and service that everybody needs, but nobody wants, right? No CEO wants to get the phone call from us and, hey, what's going on with your cybersecurity? I bet you've got some exposure.
Hey man, I used to run a dental company, and so we'd call them saying, do you want us to take out your teeth? So everything's relative.
Yeah.
So increased recurring revenue a ton, and that came mostly from the IT. How are you ending up selling? Are you selling it on a full package? Or are you selling it on a product basis? Can you walk through how you're packaging and selling?
Yeah, that was another part of our value creation plan, was to essentially make buying from us easy. The company didn't have that package managed service plan. They would sell, if you're going to do data backup, they were selling that individually. If you're going to do remote desktop management, that was an individual thing. So we moved that to, I think was pretty standard these days, where, look, for a set price, we're going to do the whole thing, and you put it on all of your endpoints, and that's how we do business together. So we made that shift, and I think it made the conversation with the customers a lot easier.
Did you have to shift some people? Did you have any T&M clients that you had to shift to managed service model?
Not many. I really don't think so. There was probably a few that I just don't remember, but no.
I feel like your sales team looks similar to mine. I'm curious what the structure of yours look like. I can tell you what mine looks like as well, and curious where you think that's going to go over the long run.
So we just revamped the way our sales team is structured. So previously, under previous ownership, it was 4, 5, 6 individuals that were just burning the phone, right? So, and it was a range of people very new to their professional career, like this was their first job, to seasoned professionals. So now what we've done is, organize under a VP of sales. We have account managers that are really meant to service existing customers, do your quarterly business reviews, cross-sell, that type of thing, really nurture those relationships. And then we have our, new business development folks that are focused on new revenue. And we're starting to organize those folks into industry verticals. So, previously each salesperson, they're calling a school, and then the next phone call, they're calling a manufacturing. And then, so now we're organizing, hey, you are going to become the expert in manufacturing and really understand their pain points. You're going to become the expert in schools, or whatever the example is.
That is awesome. And then do you have any marketing function yet?
Not really. So aside from, the rebrand with our website, we don't have an in-house marketing resource. We're evaluating that right now.
Interesting.
Do you have a marketing function?
Yeah. I mean, we started, so historically, DataTel had really just a boots on the ground sales approach, right? Local market, local people having relationships, selling stuff to clients in the area and region. And so that's been there and that's been successful, right? But there's a ceiling, there's limitations to the types of customers you can get. So we've got a director of sales, and then we've got 2 senior account executives who are they're like 80% new business focused. And then 2 account executives who are, it's kind of the step below the seniors, but they're focused exclusively on new business. And then we have separate account managers. And then we have we just hired a BDR, which is going to be doing outbound calling and lead, more in the realm of marketing and lead gen. I'm thinking about it more as a marketing function rather than a sales function. And then we have a fractional CMO who's kind of putting together the marketing structure and foundation and all the stuff that we're putting together. And then that will probably be backfilled by a full-time hire or 2, depending on where things shake out and we're going to put and commit resources. So yeah, we've been building that out right now, actually.
Yeah, that's great.
I know that we talked about sales comp plans eons ago, right? I think I had acquired and you had recently acquired, and we were sending back each other's sales comp plans. Did you change them fundamentally from when we had those conversations like a year ago, two years ago?
We've tried. We have changed them. I don't know if they've changed dramatically, but I don't know why this is so hard for us to figure out.
I know.
It's a mess, frankly. So we do what I think is fairly normal. If you sell a recurring revenue, you get, depending on how long the contract is, you'll get maybe 1 month's value or maybe 3 months value of it. Of project-based sales, you're going to get a % of the the profit margin that's in the deal. What it seems like we're doing a little bit differently, I haven't heard too many examples of this, is we don't cap commissions. So we have unlimited earning potential. And a lot of the folks that we've hired, they come from a capped commission environment. So I have one salesperson that last year made a whole lot more money than I did. So we mean it. Unlimited. Go make as much as you can earn.
That's amazing. And you'd mentioned the industry specialization. That is something that we're also focused on, right? Because we were similar to you guys. You probably have a lot of clients in your region and area, and you have a wide list of clients in different industries. And so we're trying to figure out which end industries are we going to be focused on. Where are you at in that process, and how are you? I guess we hit this spot and we're like, we need to verticalize in order to have better sales, better value to our clients. So how have you gone about that thought process? I think we're in the midst of it as well.
Yeah. So my VP of sales, he's the one leading that strategy. And we've really only in the past maybe 2 or 3 months have done that reorg into this vertical specialization. I think, it's generally going in the right direction. I see that, maybe we're being more successful in setting appointments, because they're getting, the salespeople are getting used to talking to the same types of customers, the same types of problems. So I think it's trending the right way.
Yeah. I wonder if you, as you develop the marketing function and then you bolster the sales approach with the industry specific, right? Marketing content on your website, emails, all that sort of stuff. I'm sure it will round it out and make it even better.
Yeah.
You've got investors. There's a timeline. So this is probably different than people that just own a business and they're just using it as there's probably an end in mind, a goalpost to get to so that you can either sign up for the next one or call it quits. But you're kind of 2 years into it, right? And what is a typical hold in your mind? What are you guys looking for?
This group talks about 5 to 7 years. A lot of this looks and feels very much like private equity. But there was one exit within the Novastone portfolio. Don't quote me on the number, but I think they might have held it for less than a year or just right at a year. And, they had a good opportunity, took the exit, brought on a strategic partner. And so I think just like any of us, you're always going to be open to opportunities when they come around.
I guess you've probably been close to the market in the MSP world. And you probably feel like given you got a great price, you got a good deal on the company as well, like a fair, good deal for you. Where do you want to take this? You're at 15 now. Is your goal to get it to 25, or like, where do you see as like realistic and opportunistic given what you have in front of you?
Yeah, there's a couple parts to this answer. So the way search fund economics work is the searcher, the person in my role, the more IRR that you generate, the more you are personally compensated. And so to achieve, the maximum on that calculation curve, you basically have to double the size of the business in 5 years. That's generally how the math shakes out.
Yep. That's to get a 3 or 4x on the investor money.
Yeah. But, for me personally, I didn't do this for any financial reason. Yes, that exit, that's a lot of money for anybody, but it just doesn't really, that's not my thing. I did this really to prove that, a certain type of company culture can be successful. It's I'm not saying that another type of culture is bad, but I believe that if you have a employee first culture, treat people like adults. I'm not a yeller and screamer. I don't go around yelling at people. Have a nice, safe environment where people like to come to work and get satisfaction out of their job. That putting that type of culture in place will achieve this financial result that everybody's looking for. So it's to me, it's about culture first, we'll achieve the value rather than let's go get value and figure out how we're going to do that.
So where did you learn that culture first approach? That's not typical or standard.
The person that really put me on that path, his name is Steve Gund, Gund. He's a third generation family business CEO, has grown his company from, I think when he started in the business, it was maybe 3 or 5 million, and now it's hundreds and hundreds of millions. So I was trying to recruit him to be on our board at the chemical company. And so I would go and visit his company, and he would show me how he's running his business with people first, very intentional people first activities. And we would talk about that, and it just really opened my eyes that there was another path. And then, so you start digging into it, and then you see very popular people like Simon Sinek. There's a local business owner, a company called Barry Waymiller. The CEO is Bob Chapman. So if you're in this area, you'll know it. But that's a multi-billion-dollar company, and they have a lot of material out there about people first culture and the things that they do. And it just resonated with me. I've been in environments that are very much like 1980s, like give me your list every year of the 20% of people you're going to cut because they're the low performers, and go yell at people. And like, it's just not, I'm not into that.
If you could describe the culture of the company before you acquired, and then like tell me about that, and then what shift have you made over the last 2 years?
Yeah, the culture prior to acquisition was very much centered on the owner. So I'm not giving a value, judge me, I'm just describing.
Yep.
And that owner, he was a salesperson. That was his persona, and he's very, very good salesperson. But it was really kind of, the culture was his persona, right? And I think that's the way a lot of successful first generation business owners perhaps are. So what I wanted to do, and what we've taken a lot of steps for, is to really drive engagement. Make everybody feel part of what's going on with the business, that they can contribute. If you bear with me, I'll just tell a handful of stories very quickly. I think it was in the first handful of days since the transition, and had everybody in the conference room, and we have to somehow start to build trust with these people, right? They're not going to trust you right out of the gate, but you got to start going in that direction. And they don't know me, and I don't know them. So one of the ideas that I heard from somebody else, and I just copied it, was called everybody in, handed out these notebooks, and basically said, take these notebooks, write down all the ideas that you've had about the business, all the ideas that you do have now that you think would be improvements, whatever it is, write them down, and then let's talk about them. And told them, like, look, obviously I can't promise we're going to do everything that everybody writes down, but I can promise I'll listen to you. And, I believe I fulfilled that. We did listen to folks, and we actually implemented a lot of their ideas. So I think that goes so far with people, just listen to them and actually do what their suggestion is. Holy smokes. How often in companies does that happen, especially really big companies? Like, it never happens. So we did that right out of the gate. And then now with this new executive leadership team, we've put in like individual development plans for folks to put them on a career path. We've invested a lot in training. So we have software that these folks can get trained and certified in, anything you could think of in our industry. We do a lot of employee events. Like there's a national fun at work day coming up. So we're going to do stuff there. We just do a lot of employee-centric activities.
Yeah, I think one of the best parts of the CEO job, if you like this sort of thing, is investing in people and then seeing the results come out of it. Like actually genuinely caring about people, trying to actually help them level up in whatever they want to do personally, professionally, and then seeing the results come out of it is like one of the most satisfying, coolest things I've ever done as a leader.
100% agree. That's an awesome part of the job. And, The flip side of that is, I think for folks in our position, when you see it not work, when you see somebody that maybe doesn't appreciate that, you at least for me, you really have to like not focus on that, right? Because that can really drag you down. And so I kind of coach to myself and our executive leadership team, focus on your A players, right? It's easy and it feels good to kind of get into the nitty gritty, the fires and the things that annoy you, but don't get sucked into that. Focus on your A players, the folks that get the vision, and that's where the success is.
Yeah, at our company, we actually did something this morning where we talked about, let's go through in our management meeting. We said, let's figure out, or let's talk about, are there any clients that we want to fire that are making our life really challenging? And so we went through a short list of a few, and it was like, these were all personality conflicts where the client is outside of the bounds of being reasonable and causing undue stress on the employees. And usually the employees are like, well, I just have to deal with this, and it's like flipping the switch to be like, we need mutual respect both ways. And we're not doing ourselves a service if we're serving them and not getting them what they need. Same with that client. And so maybe it's better to part ways. And that's something, that's one really interesting exercise that I've seen people do and has been really, really effective.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. There are clients that sometimes need to get fired.
Yeah, 100%. So MSPs, you're now 2 years under. I feel like I'm in a spot a year and a half in that I kind of know the industry. I know where the company's going. I have confidence now. How do you feel 2 years in?
I feel good now. I think it takes 2 years to really know a business. And there was it sounds probably like a really silly example that just kind of happened recently that made me realize, hey, I actually know what's going on now. And it's funny things that probably only owners or CEOs notice. I was just walking around and passing through our staging area where we stage equipment for jobs, and they're usually labeled with like, this is going to whatever job site. And there's just this one little package sitting there with the name of a customer. Yeah, but I knew that job was closed. Like, so why do we have this piece of equipment here that's for a customer that the job is done? So you start asking questions, and you find an extra thing that's several $1,000s that get returned. But to me, that's an indication of now all the details that are going on, that you recognize that box is out of place, right? I think it takes 2 years to get there.
Yeah, I think the industry, I think it took me like 9 to 12 months to like understand where. 9 months, I was like, oh, I have an inkling of where we needed to go. And at 12 months, I was like, okay, this is where we're going. Like I had confidence in it. First 6 months, it was like, let's just learn, be open, figure things out. And then you start to make decisions and start to make really hard corrections at that year mark is what I've seen.
I've got a question for you.
Yeah, jump into it.
If you don't mind me giving you a little bit of friendly trouble. So I saw you made a LinkedIn post really talking positively about EOS, like you recently implemented EOS.
Yeah.
And so this company had EOS and I got rid of it. So I'm curious, like what your experience has been that gave you such a positive flavor on it.
Yeah, with EOS, I walked into a company that didn't have a lot of internal structure, right? There was an in-person work environment. There was structure, but it was not able to be done very well remotely. And I'm a remote owner. I live in Texas, and the company was mostly in Idaho. And so I needed something in a structure that I needed way more structure, and I needed to jumpstart it, or else we were going to be in a bad situation across the board. So by necessity, I needed to come up with a solution. And I had seen folks be successful with EOS in the past. And really it's about, and I actually did not implement at my last company. My partner and I had differing opinions on if we wanted to implement or not. And so this time I was like, we're definitely doing this because I just want to try it out. I'd never done it before. And so it was like a learning experience to figure it out. see how it's a fit. I think I found a really good implementer, which is like the professional coach that you hire. Really connected with him and felt he understood our business and where I wanted to take the company. And then 2, the team bought in entirely. So they had never had structure, and they wanted and were desperate to have more structure. I could feel it as I talked to them. It was the things that they talked about. And so they were kind of going around in different directions, wanting more structure. And so EOS was able to provide that in okay, this is what the business is about. These are the things that we're focused on a quarterly basis. Rocks. This is how we should run the best practices, team, department meetings and whatnot. So it kind of just gave a structure for a bunch of really good people who just needed consistency and direction. And frankly, I'm not personally a great person at like structure. I'm not great at rules. Like I try to go around them. And so I'm like, I want to see how that works, because like I would love for it to work, but I don't usually like to follow my own rules, to be honest. So that it was almost like it allowed me to become a better leader way faster within an environment where most people have success.
Yeah,
that's my EOS story. I can totally see the historical legacy though. Like sometimes you have something and it's just dysfunctional or it doesn't work, and you just have to throw it out, even if it's fundamentally good. Like I could totally see that, right? Like it becomes you just need something new. You need a brand refresh. Like STL Communications, like I didn't know it was St. Louis. I thought it was STL. Like it didn't matter for me, right? But you had it in your mind that it was valuable, and some clients did. So.
Yeah. So do you do the thing at the end of the meetings where you rate the meeting?
We do. Yeah. We rate it 1 to 10. And then if it is if it's 8 or under, then we have to like really outline why. And I try to push everyone to be honest about the meeting, because I don't want to have useless meetings. So it has to be valuable. It has to be good. If it's not a 10, what is the reason why, so that we can improve on that or remove the meeting entirely?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons I got rid of it, but one silly one was the meeting rating thing, because after I sat through these for like 6 months, and like every meeting was getting ranked a 9 or a 10, like it's always a 9 or a 10. So I finally just asked somebody, like, does anybody ever rank them less than a 9 or 10? And they said, oh, no, because if you ranked it less, you're going to get a phone call from the EOS implementer. So nobody was being honest.
Yeah, see that signals to me that the implementer or the integrator was creating an interesting, like not a good environment for people to be able to be honest and authentic and open, which is the whole point of EOS. So if I was an implementer, I would be like red flag as a professional person, and maybe the implementer was bad, or maybe they didn't have one, and that's a root problem, and that's like a people problem underneath it. So it like makes it very transparent and clear, like what's going on, because you can see that, identify it, and be like, this isn't actually, it shouldn't happen like this. We should have varying success, right? And then if I see people are doing consistently, it's like, really, you really think that? I thought this meeting was terrible, right? It's a 6, right? And this is why. And like, do you guys disagree with that? And then it helps bridge the gap between the alignment piece too. It's
sure,
but it also has like a positivity to it too, underlining, right? The level 10, you want to rate the meetings a 10. You want to be more positive. Like it's set up to try to be like, get everyone aligned, get everyone positive. And if you have stuff that is an issue, you can bring it up, right? I think that's maybe behind the curtain, is like, it's like you want it to be a 10. So if you think it's most likely going to happen more often.
Yeah, that's fair.
So you're just like, I hate all structures, or you're just like, I'm going to do it my way. What's your way then? Because something else exists, right?
Sure. So, perhaps like you, like I hate structure. Like if you give me a process, I'm going to try to break it. Right? Like I'm not doing that. So, but in reality, you need some framework to run a business, obviously. So, there's EOS, and there's a whole bunch of other very similar things that go by different names, right? It's an operating system for a business. So, between myself and the rest of the executive team, we've got a lot of years under our belt. We've been exposed to a bunch of things. So we just we cobble together what we think are the best parts of different programs and run the business. We do have structure, but throwing something up on the screen and making me follow a step by step, like this is how the meeting's going, is like not my style.
To me, it's EOS is an easy button because it's got the basics and the foundations ready to go in a structure that most people can understand and get on board. If you have a more complex organization, I think that a lot of people move on to different things and different methodologies once you figure out the basics. So whatever. I mean, tomato. You got your own structure. It's just called, called something else.
Right.
Nice. Was there anything else on your mind? I feel like sometimes we turn this off and then people are like, oh wait, I thought we were going to talk about this. Anything that you're curious about or we want to dig into further?
Yeah, I'm curious on your opinion. I don't want to open a big can of worms, but what's your opinion on our supply chain? Like the vendors that we partner with? Because mine's not too positive.
You're talking about the quality of the vendor, or what exactly, or how I think about them as it relates to the services that we're providing?
So I feel that very few of my vendors are real partners to me in my business. So like they're constantly changing their and most of them are private equity owned at this point, right? So they're constantly changing their terms and conditions to be very, very favorable to them. And, they're great at the pre-sale activity, but post-sale, I need some help. And it's kind of a challenge to get help out of some of these folks.
Yeah, we've got kind of key vendors and partners, right? That are fundamental, right? Like your EDR, your backup service, your VoIP solution, and then you've got a bunch of tools that are supported. I think we care less about the tools, and those are kind of just plug and play. It's more the partner stuff that really, really, really matters. And frankly, it's just part of the process. For us, it's just part of the process of owning and maintaining a tech stack. And so you've got 30 to 40 different tools and partners, and the best combination are the ones that work on the operations side, work on the financial side, and allow you to potentially differentiate. And so we're always kind of figuring out and assessing. We've got probably one or two tools at any given time that are getting decommissioned, changed out because quality, suffers, or we found a better solution that's going to solve some other things and reduce complexity in the organization. So to me, it's like one of those like operations, like it's an ongoing farming and I haven't seen any like stark changes. The ones who have been good partners the last 2 years, and we haven't had like private equity transitions maybe you've experienced with some of your vendors.
Yeah, so we're in the process of switching out a few of our key ones now, and it's two things. One is it's service and cost. So I guess like us with our customers, right? You got to give them good service at good value, or people will start shopping it.
100%. I think the vendor space, or the vendors within the MSP space, is really interesting. They just have a huge voice relative to the owners, which is why I wanted to start this podcast too. It's because us owners, we've got a lot of opinions, but we usually don't tell publicly what we think or what's going on, right? It's all an internal battle, and getting those voices out into the ether, I think, is going to be really interesting. Really, really interesting. The vendors think they have power, but at the end of the day, it's really us. We're the gate to the ultimate end customer at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm super excited that you were able to jump on. You've got an awesome background and your experience in acquiring the company, and then what you've done so far. It honestly mirrors similar to what I've done at my company. So it's always cool to check in and see how you're doing. So
yeah, that's good, Ben. Appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, sounds good.